Hey everyone, we're in Unit 6A. This is the last topic of Unit 6A, Topic 4. We are going to be analyzing graphs of functions, and the key here is that we are going to be using interval notation to analyze the graphs. Alright, so we're going to start with talking about analyzing increasing versus decreasing intervals. It might help you in some of these problems to have two different colors like I have. I'm going to be using red for increasing, blue for decreasing. So if you want to use a colored pencil, that could help. Alright, so increasing is simply the interval over which a function is increasing. In other words, increasing means that the function is going up or it has a positive slope. Decreasing is the interval over which a function is decreasing, or where the function is going down. It also means that it's where the function has a negative slope. Alright, so we're going to talk about this with a real-life example to kind of help us. And that is a checking account, so something we can all relate to, right? So this is Amy's checking account. Down the x-axis, these are the weeks since Amy opened her account. I'm going to label this axis with an X. On our y-axis, this is how much money she has in her account. So some simple things that you might notice is like the most money she ever has is $300. That's at week 5. We could tell lots of different points along this graph, really. But the thing that I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my two different colors and I'm going to look at where her money is going up. So her graph has a positive slope from week 0 to 1, and then also week 1 to 2. This part right here between weeks 2 and 3, the graph is flat, so that's not increasing. And then it's increasing again starting at week 3 and going to week 5. And then it goes down. Her amount of money goes down or is decreasing, so that would be a negative slope. So now to answer some of these questions, the first question says, when is the amount of money in Amy's account increasing? So we talked about that here and here. And I'll say that is weeks 0 to 2 and 3 to 4, right? That is when her amount of money is going up. So again, we talked about using interval notation. Interval notation just means that we are going to write this sentence, week 0 to 2, using interval notation, which means start at 0, comma, end at 2. You can really use parentheses or brackets for these, so you really could write 0 to 2 if you wanted. I'm just going to be consistent and use parentheses in these notes, but both are correct. Alright, and so then there's another section of increasing as well, and it's this second section right here. So with intervals, if we have more than one interval, we use this symbol U, that means and then we do the second interval, which starts at 3, ends at 4. It's a comma. Alright, the next question, when is the amount of money in Amy's account decreasing? And that is our blue section right here. So that is between weeks 5 to 7. Interval notation, that would be 5, comma, 7. Alright, when is Amy's money staying the same? Her amount of money is staying the same in this one section right there, and that's weeks 2 to 3. And I'm going to say for interval notation for that one, it should be 2, comma, 3. One thing I want to point out before we move on is I want to look at all of the intervals I have on my paper, right? So 0 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 7, 2 to 3, and I want to make sure that you note that all of those numbers came from the x-axis. When we answer these questions about increasing and decreasing, all of our answers are always going to have, I'm going to actually write here, intervals use x values, and that is really key. We talked about that a little bit in the last topic when we did domain. We also only used x values. Alright, so moving on to another example. For this example, we are doing the same thing. We're going to identify increasing intervals and decreasing intervals. Oh, I switched up my colors, I think. I used red for increasing last time, blue for decreasing. So again, if you want to use colors, that might help you. And I'm going to just go ahead and from left to right, highlight where this graph is going up. So we are increasing right here. This is a positive slope. And then we decrease next. And then we increase again. And then this last section is not increasing or decreasing. That's a constant. So I'm going to go through and say, so this we said was going down, and then this section we're going up. And if you notice that there are no y values labeled at all, that's because we are not going to use y values at our answer. We're only going to use this x-axis. All right, so the first increasing interval would be this first section right here. And we have to say where it starts and where it stops. It's a little bit easier in this case to see where it stops. It stops at -3. So I'm going to start my interval and kind of work backwards. And now the starting value, I have a arrow, and that arrow is pointing to the left. And it's also going down, but on the x-axis we're concerned about going left. So that means that we start at -infinity. All right, we're going to use this u for and then we're going to describe this interval. And this interval starts at 1 and ends at 4. So I'm going to say 1 to 4. All right, for the decreasing interval, this blue section in the middle, we are going to find our starting and our stopping. Our starting value is this -3. Our stopping value on the x-axis is 1. So we're going to say -3 to 1. All right, the next example, and again, I'm going to highlight increasing and decreasing. So I'm going to draw, like in the previous example, there was this little bug drawn, and it's supposed to help you imagine if you were actually walking along the graph. So I like to actually think about left to right if I were walking on this graph, and I like to draw a little person right there. Okay, so to start on his graph, this person is decreasing, going down, and then turns around and will be increasing next. All right, so the answer for decreasing would be describing this left blue section. And since I have an arrow going to the left, that means I start at -infinity. And I stop at this part right here. I am not going to use my y values to answer any questions. I'm going to cross them out. And I'm instead going to look at where this point, what the x value is. The x value is 1. So I stop at 1. All right, increasing is this pink part of the graph, and the pink part starts at 1 and ends at this arrow pointing to the right, which means it ends at +infinity. All right, example 3. This graph is a little bit different than both of the ones we've seen. And that's because if I were to draw a little stick figure on this graph to the left, if this stick figure was walking along the graph, they would be increasing the entire time. And they are actually never decreasing. So if they're increasing everywhere, I have to just describe this graph. I have a left arrow and a right arrow, which means I'm increasing from -infinity to +infinity. All right, decreasing really means, we can see that it's never decreasing. You can write the word never. Or in math, we can use this symbol with a 0 and a slash through it. That means that there is no answer to this. There is no interval where it is decreasing. All right, for our last example, we're going to do one more increasing and decreasing problem, and then we're going to actually do one more type of analyzing. So I'm going to do red increasing, blue decreasing, and I'm going to draw a little stick figure, and this graph is going up, increasing, and then decreasing. Okay, and now I'm going to ignore these y values. I like to actually cross them off. I don't want to look at them. They're very tempting, I know. This point is really important because it's where it stops increasing. So it increases from -infinity all the way to this point, and that x value is -2. So it's increasing from -infinity to -2. And then at that value, -2, that's where it starts decreasing. It decreases forever with the right arrow. So I'm going to say -2 to infinity. All right, now we're looking at the same exact graph next, but I'm asking you something different in this graph. In this graph, it does not say increasing, decreasing. It says positive, negative. These are very different things. So first thing I want to mark is our x-axis. I'm going to cross off the y values like we did last time. And I'm going to write what the definition of positive means. Positive means interval where the graph is above the x-axis. That's what positive means. So when I think about the x-axis, this is the x-axis right here, I'm going to highlight where my graph is above the x-axis, or positive. So think about your graph as this upside down U shape. If this is the part where it's like really on the x-axis, where it's above is all of this section. So if I listed that as an interval, it would start at -4, it's above the x-axis this whole time, and then it would stop at this point, which is right on the origin, that's 0. So -4 to 0, our graph is positive. I'm going to write my answer right here in interval notation, -4, comma, 0. I'm going to put a box around this just so you know that that is the answer right there. That was our definition. So negative is the interval where the graph is below the x-axis. Okay, so our graph is below the x-axis in actually 2 places. It's below the x-axis at this 4 and down here, and also at this other section and down here. So I know I'm going to have 2 intervals as my answer, so I'm going to start by just putting a U in the middle. And let's think about this left interval first. So this interval has a left arrow, so -infinity, and then it stops at the same place, like the break between green and yellow, which is -4. So that's my first interval. Now, then my graph goes above the x-axis, and I look at where it comes back down, and that's 0. And then it goes, and I know that this looks like it's going down, so you're tempted to say -infinity, but remember we're thinking of x values. So this graph is going down, but it's also going to the right, which is +infinity. So it starts at 0, and it ends at +infinity. And that's my answer for negative. I should do this, highlight this in yellow so we know that was negative. All right, you can move on to your homework packet to practice this topic. Good luck.